Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How you all doing? And today I have a paranormal group all the way on the other side of the country. Okay, this is Spokane Ghost Crew. And in a minute, I'm going to bring on one of the lead investigators. His name is Bren. And like always, I am always super interested in what's going on in other areas of the country. Some of them, they make all the shows, but it's only the groups that work in a certain area which know about all the unusual, or how can I say, hometown haunts that only a group that lives there knows about. So anyway, let me get started on this. Bryn, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Okay, I'm gonna, like I had told you before, I'm gonna ask you what I ask all my guests. Obviously, you're neck deep in the paranormal now, but how did you get started into this? Did you have an experience as a kid, or what happened with you?
Um, it started with me when I was about 5. Me and my sister, we'd always hang out in the basement of our little brick house we had, and we'd go up to our separate rooms to go to bed. And every night, I would, see the same set of glowing red eyes in my closet,
Oh God.
and
Oh
I
jeez.
every night I was in the room with my sister under her covers, like shaking like a leaf on a tree.
Okay. And you were the only one that
And
was seeing this, or was your sister seeing this also?
oh, my sister got to see it a couple of times.
Okay. So you're okay. But it sounds like you were the main target then?
Pretty much, yeah. And after we moved out of the house, it mellowed out, but it just kind of left a mark on me.
I bet. I bet.
And then watching all the paranormal shows as I was, getting older, and
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of clicked on me, that hey, if these guys can do it, why not why not try to help people with their activity?
Sure, sure. And I think a lot of, despite what people think, I think a lot of times people also that go into actually doing paranormal investigations, they kind of like do it to confront their own fears, especially when they've had things like that happen to them when they were kids. It's like, yeah, I'm going to help somebody else, but I'm also going to help get to the bottom of whatever I experienced when you were a kid. Of
Right.
course,
And
now as an
that's always in the
adult.
back.
So,
Exactly. And that's
it,
always in the back of my mind when I'm
sure.
ghost hunting, is
And
I
let me
wonder if I can actually finally solve this.
Right, like because of course back then you were a child, you really didn't have much of a choice as far as, you know, you live where your parents, are, set up house, and like you said, the best you could do was run over to your sister's room and, be with her. And let me ask you, you never had any idea, what was it, just did you have any other besides the red eyes, you never saw anything? It was, well, which that's that's probably enough, but did you ever see anything else besides those eyes when you were there?
I mean, there was a time where a little bit of a shadow would come out, and it kind of peek around the corner a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, I tell my mom and dad about it, and it's you watch too many horror movies, you've
Oh,
got an overactive imagination, go back to bed.
right, yeah.
But my sister knew.
And you know what? You're not the first one that I've spoken to that kind of got the same feedback from their family, So it's like, okay, well, what else am I going to do? So then what happened?
Right.
You moved away, and did you ever have any other experiences at the other house? And the reason why I ask is that sometimes people sometimes find that even though they move, it's kind of that they're also sensitive, and that's why they pick up on stuff even at different locations. Did that ever happen to you once you left that house?
Um, I never saw the glowing red eyes again, but I always picked up on if there was a spirit in the house, I was usually the first person to pick up on it.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Just like weird happenings, and
Sure, sure. So in other words, yeah, yeah, you got that sensitive thing going on. Um,
me and my sister both are fairly good sensitive.
so then did you join a paranormal team and then you established your own, or how did you do that?
Well, me and a couple of buddies of mine were sitting around, and you know, even as a kid, I had always had an interest in the paranormal, and
Mm-hmm.
the guys I was sitting around with, it started out as a joke, hey, what if
Sure.
we started a paranormal,
What would
you
happen,
know,
right?
and we actually talked to our friend Joe Jeffries, who was telling us, about his daughter and how the blankets kept getting ripped off of her and all this. And so I talked to my buddies, David Dement, who's my EVP specialist,
Okay.
Richard Jansen, who's no longer with us, and John Barrios, who is still with us. And we formed the Spokane Ghost Crew.
Okay. So in other
Our
words,
first,
let me ask you something. Is it uh did that member Jansen, was it that he left the group, or
yes, he left the group about 4 months ago.
okay. Okay. So basically and I take it then you're like one of the original members then.
Yes, I am the original founder.
Okay. All right. So you've been there from the beginning. So because I know normally it's like an evolution. Um, it's really interesting because that's usually how it works out, that you got that original member who does it, usually gets involved with it like to help a friend or somebody they know. And like you said, you do it, but you kind of like not really seriously, and then it just takes off. It just takes on a life of its own when you start actually having, being on the other side of it. In other words, and being, instead of being the hunted, you're the hunter. So, and whatever happened with that case that you talked about, that girl was getting her blankets yanked off of her. What became of that investigation?
Well, when we started out with the investigation, it was just me, David, John, and Rick.
Mm-hmm.
But we started out with nothing but flashlights and a couple of flip phones.
Really?
And we captured some of the best evidence that I think to date that we've captured.
Isn't that great when that happens, though?
It is, and then we added another member by the name of Trevor Gooch, who's now our equipment tech,
Okay.
and he brought in the camcorder and some old school tape recorders.
Okay.
And by the time this investigation was done, we actually landed ourselves on a Creme 2 News morning show.
Wow.
And
Wow.
from there, it just kind of skyrocketed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there's, because I looked and I know that there's like every city has the historical or the famous haunted locations. Okay. For
Hmm.
example, I know in your area you've got like I believe it's the Monroe City Bridge and or Monroe Street Bridge, I believe it was, and a couple of other Greenwood Cemetery. Have you been to any of these places, or have you been going more
Oh,
towards?
yeah.
You've been to all of these. Do any of
Greenwood Cemetery is one of my favorite spots to investigate.
really? What's going on at Greenwood?
Greenwood, you have three levels of the cemetery. Level one is pretty mellow. The endowed section is pretty creepy. A bunch of old style, little crosses not taken care of at all.
Okay.
The second level is where most of the activity is. You have the Elks Mausoleum, and then you have what they call the Thousand Steps.
Oh, what is that?
And the Thousand Steps is the big thing here in town. I'm going to prove I'm a man after I get out of high school and take my girlfriend up to the Thousand Steps and not run away.
Okay.
The legend is that when kids will try to do this, that the
Uh-huh.
spirits will actually chase them away.
Really? Like this is like a ritual of coming of age kind of thing? Like,
It's been going on since about the 60s, as far as I know.
really? God, that long? And what is
And
it?
we actually got up on the steps, and we've actually answered the age-old question here in town, and indeed they are haunted.
And what is it? I mean, what's the experience?
The first time I was there, it was a real rush of adrenaline. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, the fear ran through me pretty hard that night.
Let me tell you, that's a good. It's like how much of this is real or manufactured inside of me, like anticipation. But hey, so but you
It was
did
a
it right.
mixture of them. Was that?
You did it though, right? I mean, it's like sometimes
Oh
it's.
yeah. And when we were going up there, we Trevor had a tablet that had built-in EMF detector on it,
Mm-hmm.
and you put it on one side of the steps, you wouldn't get no EMF. You move it to the other side, and we're getting spikes within the 50s to 70s. And we have a lot of that in the JNR house as well on our YouTube page
Okay.
under our extended highlights.
Okay. So you actually recorded and you got those. And was there an event? What was the origin? Do you know what was the origin of what happened there that, that everybody that goes there possibly experiences it?
Well, they say that the stairs were built for the Elk Lodge back in the earlier days.
Okay.
Their mausoleum was built with a bunch of brass, had a big brass elk on top of it, and a couple of members there. They wouldn't raise their drink prices or anything like that, and their club was about to fall under.
Okay.
So they actually stripped the entire mausoleum of anything that was worth any money, brass or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my theory is it really angered the other brothers that were buried there,
Okay.
and now they just kind of haunt that area.
Oh, that's very interesting. And it's
I used to,
persisted for a long time then. I mean, you're talking about
oh yeah,
over 50 years.
oh yeah, and I used to work with a guy named Chet Kasky, who was a historian of Spokane,
Okay.
and I used to run tours with him. So the Greenwood Cemetery and the downtown stuff, and
Okay.
it was really interesting history this town has.
Okay. I saw another look, and you tell me, and the reason why I'm asking you is that I know sometimes places get reputations for being haunted, but then in reality they're not. How about the Fox Theater? Have you heard of that?
Um, I have. I've actually done some tours on it,
Okay.
but unfortunately we can't seem to get our team in there. A lot of the places downtown, they kind of steer clear of the paranormal team.
Yes, and I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
And you got the Fox Theater, you got the Bing Theater, the Davenport Hotel, the Ruby Hotel.
Right.
All
Exactly.
these have just dark, deep, rich paranormal history, which we just want to go in and show them, and
Yeah, I
they
know.
just kind of step back, throw their hands up in the air, and no, 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 we don't want no part of that.
I know. I know. I really don't understand. I do understand it, but but I know I've encountered that myself. Let me ask you something. There's something else that I saw, and I was curious about this because I didn't know what this. I've never heard of this. Something called the Horse Slaughter Camp.
Horse
Uh,
Slaughter King, that's right out by the state line.
okay.
Um, that's a spot we've been really trying to get into as well, along with Fort Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it has to go through the Native Council, and they're not too fond of that either.
Okay. Yeah, I know. You know what? When you're reliant on stuff like that, that usually happens. If you're trying to gain access, which is different, of course, when you're doing, somebody's asking you to come in and do it for them versus one of these
Right.
locations, you got to get permission. And one of two things, either they don't want it, or two, if they do, they want to charge you an arm and a leg just to go in there. So I understand
And kind of
totally
like,
what you mean.
we we do all of our work for free. We don't ever charge our clients for residentials or anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
unlike other paranormal teams on TV, we don't have $50,000 to say, hey, we want to investigate
Sure.
your building while you turn your back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your budget is your budget, and sometimes just what it costs to get there. The actual. Yeah, because everybody thinks, well, if you own the equipment or whatever, besides the money you invest in your equipment is just the logistics of
Huh.
getting to and from, and if you happen to stay overnight, yeah, it adds up. I totally understand. So yeah, it's coming out of your
Right.
pocket, in other words. So what?
And
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
when we started this team in 2014, that was my main rule. Is we're out here to help people. So the whole charging thing just went right out the window. That was my first rule of starting this team.
Oh yeah, sure. Because there's a lot of people that need the help, but they just they can't afford it. If it comes down to that, they're gonna have to pay for somebody to come and and help them out. Then they're kind of
Exactly.
stuck. So let me ask you, what have you come across? And I ask this, because nowadays, unfortunately, because of some of the shows, people they think things are paranormal or supernatural, and then when the team goes out there, it's like, no, it's not. It's like a million other reasons. You've got something in your attic, like an animal, or your
People
house is
behind the scenes
settling.
pulling a string.
Yes. Um, I'm sure you've come across stuff like that. Have you? But I'm gonna ask you about the opposite. Have you gone in on an investigation, which when you talk to the client, they're kind of like making it like, oh yeah, something's going on. Then when you go in there, it's like surprise, you've got something really, really malevolent. You know?
Yeah, I've dealt with that a couple of different times.
Okay. And what happened?
Um,
What happened with those cases? If you can, I don't want you to, go ahead and if you've got any type of confidentiality going on with a client, I don't want you to like, give any information you're not supposed to. But if you can,
oh, definite. We actually come up with nicknames for the investigations that we can't give the intel on the client out.
okay, okay,
Um, the Ghost on Post
okay,
was a very interesting investigation. He warned us ahead of time that there was something weird going on, but after I saw a big old heavy wooden door practically slam shut,
ooh,
and then just the constant footsteps upstairs, one of my members getting attacked. I wasn't okay with that, but
what,
it
what,
it definitely opened up my eyes to a whole new world of the paranormal.
what happened to your member?
He got a pretty good looking scratch on his arm,
Oh,
just standing in the middle of a room.
yeah, that rules out like
And
you rubbed up against something. So,
right, and then we have the J in our house. Our first investigation.
okay,
Um, I got physically attacked in there twice. We actually have one on camera on our YouTube page, which is in our extended highlights as well.
okay. And what happened? I mean,
Um,
was this something
well,
that when you say attack, what happened to you?
I was sitting there, and it was me and my sister,
Okay,
who's also the manager of the team,
okay,
and we were just sitting there talking, trying to get the spirit to communicate with us, and all of a sudden, my knee started burning, like right above it,
okay.
and I said, okay, you got to shine the flashlight down here. And at the same time, my sister says, you know, oh my God, it just like dropped 10 degrees in here. It's freezing.
Wow.
And we looked down, and it looked like something got carved into my leg, and you can actually see skin pulled up.
Oh my God.
And not only that, this thing destroyed a rose in the room. I mean, we left the room, we come back in, and this dried up rose is shredded all over the room. We go down to put our EMF detector on it, and EMF is 0.4, 0.5.
Okay.
There was a time to where I almost knocked out one of my investigators. I got this really just rage feeling, and I said, you got to shine the light on my face. I don't feel okay. And when he did, I balled up my fist and I almost hit him.
Wow.
And as we went over to the other end, we heard two spirits bickering back and forth. You can't really make out what they're saying.
Right, right.
But at the end, it ends in, you son of a...
Oh my God. You know what? And
like,
I've heard that a
whoa.
lot. I hear like a lot of people sometimes when they hear like exactly like what you said, like conversations, it's almost like so that you can't quite make out what the words are, maybe till the very end, but you know it's like, okay, it's none of us, so
right. And then
somebody there was angry.
The best EVP we captured in there, and this is how angry this thing was, is we documented that there was at least 13 of them in there. And there was an actual portal upstairs and a hidden room that they didn't find out until they had a fire in there.
A hidden room, you said?
Yeah, you went upstairs, and there was a hidden room off to the left that even Joe and Lisa didn't know about until a fire happened up there, and part of the wall had melted and they could see back there.
That is so interesting.
Let me tell you what, when we got the opportunity to look back there, things dropped, I swear to you, 20, 30 degrees.
Oh, God.
That room was not a room I really wanted to go poking around in.
What do you think the purpose of the room was? Because usually people hide things for a reason.
Well, there was a room full of peacock feathers.
Okay.
And there were some weird symbols and drawings on the floor.
In that room?
In the hidden room. So we think that they were practicing something in there and opened up a portal to where the spirits could come in, but they can't get out.
Okay. Wow.
And the J&R house was a really, really gut-wrenching but exciting experience for me at the same time.
So let me ask you, what did you guys do at the end? I mean, were you able to close the portal? Did this family move away? I mean, this sounds like a really intense haunting.
We were actually able to close the portal.
Okay.
Me and my sister were.
Okay.
It took a lot of work. I really don't remember all of it that well.
Really?
It just kind of, it's like one of those nights where you drink too much and you're all fuzzy the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
That's what it kind of seems like with me. I remember sitting there and, to come in contact with them, we had to pull out a very bad tool that I don't like using, and I've only used once.
Okay.
And that was the Ouija board.
Okay.
We came in contact with the spirits in the house.
Okay.
And we were actually able to close the portal through the Ouija board. but that was before the house literally started shaking
Oh
and
God.
pictures falling off the walls.
Are you
And
serious?
yeah, dead serious.
And
It
what did I mean, did you identify any of the main I guess the culprit, the one that was affecting you that angry, or was it just
it to me, I think it was the elderly man in there, because you had a child which we captured on the camcorder.
okay?
He was he came into the camcorder picture a little bit
Okay.
and then slowly came back out. You had an older couple, which was, you know, the smell of baked bread and the anger that Joe and Lisa were showing towards each other.
Okay. Okay.
Because every time we captured the elderly couple on EVP, they were always bickering back and forth.
Right. Okay. Which was that conversation that you had heard? Do you think that was that bickering that you had heard? That conversation then was them?
Yeah, that's my best guess right there.
Okay.
And you
Wow.
know, there was some other, you know, miscellaneous spirits in there that we never really came in contact with. But the little girl that called me out by name,
Wow.
I used my nickname when we first started. I had always been called Bubba because of my size.
Okay.
And this thing, she said Bubba to begin with, and then the next investigation, it was Brian. And I was like, whoa, no, that's not okay. That
Wow.
name hasn't even been spoken in that house.
Wow.
It was definitely an intelligent haunting.
Yes, and that is, you know what? I'm glad you're making that distinction because a lot of people don't realize that sometimes you do get what's considered just residual stuff. You know, it's there's nothing there. It's just something that maybe played out a million times in that location, and it's just basically woven. It's imprinted into the fabric, but there's nothing there.
Yeah, like residual, meaning, you know, someone walking across the floor to look out the window, you know, twice a night.
Exactly, exactly. Like this is not like in other words, there's no ill intent. There's no, you know, how can I say? You're not gonna get anything trying to attack you or anything like that. You know.
Yeah, residual don't even know you're there. It's just kind of that energy that lingers around. It's the intelligent spirits that you got to look out for.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think sometimes it's really important also to distinguish for some, for some people because they don't understand, that even though you could say, okay, I'm hearing weird stuff or whatever. Let's say somebody going up and down the stairs. That's a for instance. Yeah, it might not
Right.
be somebody living, but even when a team goes in there, they could tell this is residual, which means it's there's nothing there, nothing that's going to harm you. There's no intelligence, there's no malevolence, there's no interaction with the living, versus an intelligent haunting. Then that takes on a whole different flavor, like what you said,
Exactly.
where then you've got interaction, and if you've got something that's got a more sinister character to it, whatever it might be. So what happened? You closed the portal, and what happened when the family was there? That was it. It was good.
Yeah, they said that it had mellowed out. They moved about a month later,
Okay.
and about 4 months later, somebody else had moved in there, and so I decided I'd give them, you know, a month or two to live there and get the feeling. And I went up to the door and I knocked on it, and the husband had answered, and I said, you know, my piece. Hi, I'm Brian with Spokane Ghost Crew. We've investigated this house numerous times,
Right.
I just wanted to know if you guys have experienced anything or if it's nice and comfortable.
Okay.
And the guy said, look, I'm a believer in the paranormal. I know what's going on, and this house is comfortable. There's nothing here.
Oh, that's great.
I was
That's
like, cool. Well,
fantastic.
then we did our job.
Yes, absolutely. Let me tell you something. That right there you're absolutely right. That is a very good test that what you guys did took, in other words. Okay, because you hear sometimes of people
Right.
doing a little bit of an intervention of a group going in there, but it's like a temporary thing, and then it comes back twice as bad if they just didn't do it quite right or there was something else going on besides what they thought of.
Exactly.
That
And I always tell our clients, I tell them, this could be a one-time investigation where we get everything we need, or this can draw out. And well, what do you mean by draw out? And I tell them, well, the spirits, the spirits don't work on our time. We work on their time.
is
So
exactly
when they
right.
want to when they want to contact us, they'll come and let us know what's going on. And our first investigation is always going in there, not poking the bear, provoking or anything like that.
Right.
Our first investigation is to go in and try to actually make contact with what's in there, find out who he or she is, find out if it's, poltergeist, if it's malevolent, if it's just, residual, or if it's intelligent.
Exactly. Exactly.
I guess
Again,
it's kind of like playing 20 questions.
you know what? But again, I'm really glad you make that distinction because, like I said, when you're not going to the famous historical places and you're talking about where people live day in and day out, and you got to go in there, despite what they're telling you. It's like, okay, let's find out. Is somebody like
Yeah, I mean,
it could
you've got
not
to
be
make
supernatural,
your own judgment.
And even then, people don't realize there's different levels of
Exactly.
paranormal. It could just be something innocent to totally, like what happened to you, that you were getting attacked, and it sounds like you were getting some type of an influence of an oppression, like you said, that you were ready to hit one of your team members. There's a whole scale of different degrees of what could be in there. Uh, and sometimes teams go in there sometimes expecting the worst, and first you got to go in there and just, like, for lack of a better word, take the temperature and see what's really there. And
Exactly.
so what
Yeah,
happened? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I made my rookie mistake a few years ago.
You did. What happened?
I went in completely unprepared, because I have a ritual with myself. I meditate for at least 30 minutes before an investigation.
Okay.
I use the white light to protect and cleanse.
Okay.
And I
That's a great.
walked into Colfax, Washington with my team.
Okay.
And I walked in with a chip on my shoulder. Oh, this ain't nothing. This is just another investigation. Yeah. Stupid rookie
Oh.
mistake.
Oh. Oh.
We stepped into the abandoned hospital called St. Ignatius in Colfax, Washington. For anybody who's listening, I recommend the tours. It's a phenomenal place. But we went to room 311, known as Rose's room.
Okay.
And my shaman at the time, James Malacote, he didn't want to go in the room. He absolutely refused. He finally came into the room, and me and him together pinpointed where Rose's bed was, where she died, and what year she died. Right there, that should have gave me my first initial symbol to get out of the hospital.
Oh, okay.
We walk out of Rose's room, and I look down the hallway.
Okay.
And me and James at the same time see a shadow figure at the end of the hallway.
Okay.
He looked at me, I look at him. Dude, are you seeing this? Yeah, I'm seeing it. This thing stands straight up. And
Oh,
I'm no small guy. I'm 6'5".
okay.
And this thing towered me. This thing had to be 8, 9 feet tall.
Wow.
And I'm about 325, and it was about four of me put together in size. And the
God.
glowing red eyes came out.
Mm,
And I stared this thing. I'm frozen in fear staring this thing right in its eyes. And every meter we had, every K2 meter, every ghost meter
everything went off.
would go off on James.
Wow.
And we left Colfax, and my team fell apart. The Spokane Ghost Crew was no more for about a year and a half.
Really?
It actually followed me home.
Oh, yeah. You know what? You beat me
I
to my next
had
question. That's, go ahead.
I had nightmares of not only killing my family,
Oh, crap.
but killing my team members, causing harm to myself, in such a deep, dark depression that I
Wow.
literally locked myself in the room and didn't want anything to do with my family, my friends, nothing.
How long did this go on
And
for?
this went on for about a year.
That long? Wow.
And so I was actually able to get rid of it. And that's when I made my comeback. And the SGC's up and running, and we've been going strong now for a good 5 months.
So you think, let me ask you, prior to you guys seeing this thing, had anybody else seen something and described that same figure with the red eyes, or were you, your team, the first ones that actually, let me tell you something, you say you described it really scary. Oh my God, sighting. Were you the guys the first ones that had actually seen this?
Yes, me and James were the first person to see it, and then we went into the mortuary where me and Rick saw the same figure, minus the glowing red eyes, actually following us around. But
Okay.
here's the thing about Colfax.
Okay.
We didn't just do the hospital. We were the first paranormal team ever to do numerous buildings in this town.
Okay.
And when we come back home to put together just this super package, I mean, there was so much evidence we captured. It was unbelievable.
Okay.
We get everything on, we get ready to put it on the computer, and there's nothing.
Oh my God, you're
All of
kidding.
our camera evidence, all of our EVPs, our stills, everything gone.
God. Oh my God. You guys must have been like tearing your hair out, but at the same time thinking, what the hell?
Oh yeah, I broke my laptop. I was that PO'd.
I bet. I bet.
I flipped over a table. I was like, this is bullcrap. No, where is our evidence?
And that's just too much of a
And
coincidence, you know what I mean?
exactly, and having to tell, Valerie that, hey, you're the first person to let my team come in, and guess what? We have diddly squat for you for evidence.
Wow.
Really kind of put a hurting on our team.
Of course. Sure. I mean, come on, you can blame it on the supernatural, but let's face it. Again, your credibility is what's at stake here. So let me ask you, what is
Exactly.
the history of that hospital? I mean, it's been how old was it? What was the origins of that location, of that building?
Um, oh, I think it closed in the 1930s,
Okay.
and the place had just been sitting there, just run down. There was construction that was going on in there, which kind of
Okay.
heightens the spirits up a little bit.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think with the combination of the construction, numerous. I mean, she was running tours daily through there. I think the
Oh.
spirits just got a little, upset, and just happened to take it out on my team.
Because you know what? I'll be perfectly honest with you. What you described, I mean, hospitals are hotbeds for paranormal activity.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
so much
forget it.
death in
You got a bunch of
hospitals.
people that go in there are sick and die and whatever. I mean, that's okay. That's the norm. But based on what you're describing, this look like this is the kind of thing you see most often in either one prisons, okay, um, or it makes you. But when you now that you because I was thinking, well, hospital could be depends what kind of hospital it is. But you said that she was running tours through there, and sometimes that opens up to bring in a lot of things based that's just exactly like what you saw. That type of
Exactly.
that type of entity. Uh huh.
I mean,
Yeah.
see, I had been thinking a lot about Colfax. I mean, Colfax is in my mind 24/7,
Okay.
and I actually got a hold of the director,
Okay.
Valerie, again,
All right.
and I said, look, we apologize, for the evidence. I'm not gonna lie. It had to have been either a malfunction or paranormal, but I need to go back in there. I need I need to get answers. I need to know why this thing followed me home.
Right.
I need to know what his grudge is against me. And I had straight told my team, you guys do whatever you want in this building. You investigate wherever you want. You
Right.
stay off the third floor. The third floor is mine and mine alone. Because that's where that entity was. And, I need answers.
Do you think that they fixated on you because you were challenging it? Do you think?
I I'm not gonna lie. I provoked it. I provoked it bad
Okay. All right.
to the point to where I took one of my members and I said, "Hey, this here's the surgeon that killed you. What do you got to say about it?"
Oh my God. Who is that lucky member, team member that you did
That
that?
that would be Richard Guthrie. He is my
Oh
my
God.
go-to throw under the bus guy. Anytime
My.
I need provoking, that's the guy I go to.
Okay. I bet if you go back, he's not gonna go to no third floor with you again. Now let me ask you:
Oh yeah,
did any of the other members were they affected like you were, or was it just you?
it was me and James. James actually the next morning he got up and left. He was done with Colfax.
Really? That bad?
And oh yeah. See, after all the meters went off on him and we got him outside, he
Mm-hmm.
went back to the campsite
Okay.
and he just heard this heavy breathing outside of his tent. And he'd go out there, check it out. There'd be nothing there. We got back to the site. So it was
Mm-hmm.
me and him and another member sharing a big tent,
Okay.
and we could hear the same thing. And
Oh.
every 10, 20 minutes, we were getting up, looking outside. Okay, there's got to be a cougar out here. There's a deer. Something's out here. I walked that entire park in a pair of shorts and a tank top in 29-degree weather.
You were gonna find whatever it was.
I was going to find whatever it was that was messing with us, and there was nothing. He packed up his gear. He took off. He's investigated once or twice with us since then. Didn't really have an effect on Trevor. It really didn't have an effect on anybody else. I mean, of course, you get, the tiredness and,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the bickering back and forth because you're constantly around, your other people for 4 days.
Exactly.
But everybody in my group, though, that investigates with us, minus Richard, because I've only known Richard for 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But every investigator I have, I've known for at least 10 to 15 years. These guys are like my brothers.
Right.
These guys are my family.
Exactly. This is not somebody that you know that just came to the team and you don't know their background or anything like that.
Exactly. And I mean, we've let other people join, like Richard. He was a gold mine to find, and that guy is an amazing investigator. And we've hired other people in the past, and it causes friction, it causes drama in the team, and
Okay.
that's not what we're about. You know, we're a brotherhood
Sure.
and a sisterhood. You know, I've
Let me
got
tell
my
you
wife
something.
who investigates with us, and my sister. I just trained my niece who's actually been out investigating with us.
Let me tell you something. This is really what keeps the groups together. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of groups that within the first or the second year, the most, they dissolve. Because even though at the beginning, of course, it's a team, they don't gel. They don't, they just don't have that understanding of personalities and of somebody filling in when somebody else is not there, and just a commitment to just keep going. Because let's face it, sometimes there's always going to be the rub between people that don't get along, or that day they're just having a bad day. You realize that person's just having a bad day today. Let's move forward. But
Exactly,
that
and
happens.
that's that's one of the best things in the world about having a team that I've known people in for 10, 15 years. You know, who I've spent my teenage years with, and I can. Oh, he's just having a bad day. He'll get over it. Nobody get butthurt about it. It's all
Mm-hmm.
good.
Sure. Exactly.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, brothers do fight.
Oh, sure.
We've had our hellacious arguments in our team about the way things should be, but at the end, it's all about coming together and finding that middle place to meet and moving on.
Yeah. Especially if you all have that common interest and you bring something to the team. Everybody brings something to the table. So, okay, now let me ask you, because it sounds like this last investigation then that you did at this hospital, like you said, it kind of like decimated your team. Besides the way it affected you personally, which, to be honest with you, if you were in that state of mind, it was good that you did not go on any investigations, because basically
Oh
you would
yeah,
have been very it would have been very risky for you to do that.
I would have been wide open, very
Yes.
susceptible to
Yes.
possession, to another physical
Oh,
attachment.
sure.
And that's what I tell my team. I tell them, if you're having a bad day, leave the wolf at the door.
Yes.
Because if you
Yes.
don't, you're leaving yourself wide open.
Plus, you're putting your other team members at risk, by the way. Okay.
Exactly.
So now let's say you went through that year, and now you're like, for lack of a, you're back in the saddle. Okay.
Oh,
And
yeah.
um, I know you're going to go back to that hospital, and I understand. I know where you're coming from as far as wanting to go back, especially to that third floor. Let me ask you, in that interim, has this, because I find it difficult to believe that nobody else has gone through that tour or anything has not had some type of lasting effect. Whether they come back and they tell her or not, you never know. But she's never told you about any of the people going through the tour ever coming back to her and telling her.
No,
Okay.
she did tell me that we weren't the first team to lose evidence there. She said a
Oh,
couple other teams had come out of there with nothing.
how interesting. Hmm.
The weirdest part was when we were in the stairwell, because we had a couple of tour people with us that
Right.
oh, there's a paranormal team in there. I want to go in too.
Mm-hmm.
A piece of ceiling that people had walked under a million times
Right.
just happens to fall on this girl's head.
Are you serious?
Yeah, just out of nowhere, a piece of plaster comes down and cracks her right on the head.
Oh man. See?
That's a warning sign. That's, hey, you need to
Yeah.
pack up your stuff and get out of my hospital, please.
Well, you know what? Recently, I was speaking to another investigator, and we were talking about this. And he does all types of investigations, but he works a lot with demonic entities, and I'm going to use that word very lightly because I think that it's overused a lot to identify paranormal entities or occurrences. But anyway, one
I
of the
agree
things,
with you 100%
you
on
know,
that.
it's like everything is let's go straight for the D word because it's got that scary. But anyway, what we were talking about when I had that conversation with him, and based on his feedback, and he told me, he says, you know what? Whenever ICE go and when we're doing an investigation, we have manifestations where they are able to move stuff that's usually very, very heavy. He goes, that's one of my first indicators that if it's not demonic, it's very malevolent. He says normally regular human entities or discarnates, like your human types, they'll move stuff or you'll get feelings. But he says when you're talking like what you just described, that a piece of plaster falls, he says right away that's my first indicator that we've got something here that's really, really dark that's able to do this, which kind
And
of
see,
ties in with what your experience at that hospital.
I I agree with him to an extent on that. I I kind of lean more towards poltergeist activity
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to moving objects. I mean, a poltergeist can move heavy objects as well.
Sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of demonic forces out there, but to jump to the conclusion that every time something moves is demonic.
Right. Well, you know what? I think he was also looking at it because if you look at the classic cases of poltergeist, there's always, they say, that prepubescent or that teenager in the household. And, sometimes there's friction in the household and sometimes it even follows that target person around. And some people say, well, it's displaced human kinetic energy or there's an entity using the displaced kinetic energy of that young person to manifest. And he was looking at it
Exactly.
from the point of view of where that, where those circumstances weren't present. Because we talked about also about poltergeist cases. Because, I think a lot of times people would be surprised. I know a lot of people don't believe it, but humans do have kinetic abilities, especially when you're under stress.
Oh,
Uh,
most definitely. There's no telling what the human brain can do when you're under mass
yes,
amounts of stress.
yes. And,
Such as the J in our house, they were constantly, bickering back and forth, and that negative energy,
oh,
it
yeah,
feeds.
yes,
That's what these spirits thrive off of, is negativity.
yes, yes. And as a matter of fact, when people get into that fear, that vicious circle of fear, 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 it's like you're feeding it. I'm not telling you, yeah, if weird stuff are going on in your house, of course you're going to get scared up to a certain point. But you see a lot of people just like give up and like give in, and they feel all helpless. And it's like, you know what? There's a point where you got to take ownership of your space and stand up for yourself, because if not, you're basically making it worse for yourself, because like you said, it feeds off of this fear that you give off, or that you're being victimized by an unseen whatever the case might be. um
Exactly. And, that actually describes one of the more recent cases that we've done
okay.
out in Deer Park, Washington.
All right. What happened?
Um, there was a couple that had called us, and we went out to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife was just, fearful, very negative, very fearful.
Okay.
And as we're walking through his house, he has this picture on the wall that has candle holders on it. And we get about 10 feet away from that candle holder, and all of a sudden, a glass pops out, and it shatters on the floor.
Okay.
And their first instinct is, forget this, I'm out,
Yeah.
instantly showing the fear.
Yes.
And I understand that, if you're not used to dealing with it, and I explained to him, after the investigation, do not show this thing fear.
Mm-hmm.
You show him fear and negativity, he is going to strengthen, and there's no telling what he's going to do.
Exactly.
during that investigation as well, our night vision came up missing.
Really?
And it was actually found in the same spot the next morning.
Interesting, huh? Oh, yeah, I've
And
heard of that
it was
before.
quite interesting. I kind of scratched my head and said,
I know, I
"Oh,
looked here.
that's I haven't dealt with that before. That's kind of weird."
But you know what? That's so typical. You hear of that happening in people when they well, you guys were actually already, but one of the things you hear a lot of people when they start experiencing these paranormal events, like regular people, like their stuff will go missing, okay, like their keys or was their stocks or stuff like this, and then they find it a few days later, either exactly where they looked or in a really improbable place that they know it would never have gotten to. So, yeah,
Right.
that's your first tip off that, yeah, there was something there.
Exactly. And a lot of the times, a set of keys will come up missing, and people instantly jump to, it's a poltergeist.
Hmm.
Which you do have what we like to call tricksters.
Oh, yeah,
A,
absolutely.
a malevolent spirit that
Yes.
likes to mess with the living.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. And
Now we've dealt with a few cases like that, and the evidence that shows was fairly good.
what happened with this family? This investigation that you were talking about. That let me ask you: was she being fearful because that was her personality, or she had prior experiences, or was it just because of what was happening at that point, or was it something that she was?
Um, this this particular case, they have been followed
Oh,
for a good amount of time,
there you go. Okay.
and the best we could do was sage their house, and
Mm-hmm.
that seemed to have done the trick for them.
Great. Fantastic. Because I was just about to say, was she fearful because she had been already experiencing something similar in other locations? So she was like, okay, it's whatever was at the other house and the other house and the other house, and I know it's me or us or whatever, and they get that.
I
Okay, yeah.
Yep, this thing actually followed them from California.
Wow. How long had it been around? Or do they know? Let me ask you, do they have a reference as to who or what? I'm not gonna have to. That doesn't have to be a person or what was the event.
Well, the husband seems to think that it might be his father, where the wife seems to think it might be her grandmother. But at the same time, we all know that spirits can portray,
Yes.
family members and loved ones to gain that closeness.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
And that's what I told them as well, and it seemed to have mellowed out once we did the saging. We told them, make sure to sage the house at least once a month.
Exactly.
Put the salt in the window seals and around the door barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't heard anything back from them, so I'm guessing the trick has been taken care of.
And you know what? And you made a good point earlier when you said that thing about the trickster spirits. One of their abilities is to mimic or portray themselves exactly like as a grandfather, as a family member, in other words, because that's their foothold into your, people accepting it because even though they're scared, they're thinking, oh, it's my grandmother, oh, it's my brother, my father, or whoever, you know, almost like you feel guilty. I don't want to chase this away, even though I feel really uncomfortable or bad because, but yeah, that's part of their entryway into, I'm not gonna say, but kind of, like that vampire story where you gotta invite it in for it to come in.
Exactly.
It's almost kind of like that same type of thinking, especially when you're talking
I
maybe
mean,
a non-human entity.
and you see, my first thought on it is if this is one of your family members,
Hmm.
why is it trying to drive you away? Why is it messing with you instead of giving you comfort like that family
Exactly.
member should be?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's one of my first telltale signs that this is either a mimicker or,
Mm-hmm.
the some sort of demonic entity that is
Yes.
trying to get close, and that's not going to be a good sign.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. You know what? It's not. And that thing about just the way it makes you feel, you're absolutely right. Unless you had a very disturbing relationship with that family member, okay, 9 times out of 10,
Exactly.
you're not going to get that. Yeah, that's your first. This is your first indicator that maybe what you're dealing with is something that is using that family member as a ruse to gain entry and acceptance into their world, and then it works its way from there. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize how that happens a lot. Because I've been on
Exactly.
investigations when they'll tell me, "Oh, I thought at the beginning it was my, like you said, some family member," and then the thing it just they like kind of like lay back, and then all of a sudden it just builds in intensity. It becomes totally malevolent and very disturbing. And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "No, well now." And it's but yeah, but now the weeks or the months have gone by, and it's invaded. I'm going to use a dramatic word. It's invaded your space, and it's gotten what it's wanted. Unfortunately, it works that way
And
sometimes.
that's 100% accurate. That's exactly the way it goes.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's really hard to deal with, 'cause at the same time, you're trying to provoke this thing to come out and tell us who it is, and it's hiding from it. And you're like, okay, well, if this is your family member, why isn't it coming out and talking to us?
yes. Because in truth, let's go down the road of if it's legitimately a family member whose spirit is trapped or they've got something they want to say. They got to tell you, so they've been following you all over the place. Like you said, if you're giving the spirit the chance to get their message across, you would think that they would jump on it and use whoever's there. If you have a psychic or a sensitive or anybody, or if you're using any type of tool, they would jump at the chance to get their message across to their family member. But when they try to do that thing of like hiding out and making themselves scarce, yeah, sure. There's more to it than just that.
And that's really Uncle Lou. He doesn't want to come out and say hi.
Yeah.
Even if you try to contact him, but it's still Uncle Lou.
Well, and in some cases, you're going to have people that look at it that way because they don't want to go beyond that and get even more scared, even if they're already really frightened of what's going on. Um,
Exactly. They want to believe that it's a family member for more comfort
okay.
until they find out, the hard way that it's not.
And let me ask you something because I know outside, have you ever, and I know you talked about, this last, investigation that you had that basically, the one to the hospital and then now you're going back out there. But in between all these times, did you ever have an episode or, not that you were purposely going in on an investigation? Either you went someplace, a park, a house, anywhere, no investigation, and things just started happening or you started seeing and experiencing things. Because I find that a lot of paranormal investigators, once they're in this field, it kind of jumps at you sometimes even when you're not on an investigation.
Um, there's a park here in Spokane called Minnehaha,
Okay.
and there's been rumors swirling around for years about there used to be an old orphanage up there, and it shut down, and a lady had murdered a bunch of these kids.
Oh, okay.
And the rumor is when you're in the park, the play sets will actually start moving on their own.
Okay.
Well, Minnehaha Park is one of the places that me and the team likes to train.
Okay.
But before we started training there,
All right.
me, David, John, and Rick,
Mm-hmm.
we like to walk through the park up to the top of the Beacon Hill, which stands fairly high, couple-mile hike.
Okay.
And we were coming down, and I kept getting this feeling that we're being watched, and you can hear something moving around. I mean, there's only so many places a human or animal can hide.
Okay.
And, I didn't think much of it. We get down to the bottom, and they're already pretty much at the car. And I stopped to look back, and we're talking middle of the day, 2 p.m., no wind whatsoever, nobody around.
Okay.
And there's a swing that's just kind of swinging back and forth.
Oh.
So that's when we decided we were going to poke around a little bit.
Okay.
And they have this old building there that used to be a water distillery there, for spring water.
Okay.
And they have these little holes in the back of them. So I decided to put a recorder in there one night.
Okay.
And was like, hey, if this used to be an orphanage, I would like to adopt you. I'd like you to come home with me. Me and my wife would love a child.
Oh.
We come back home. We didn't really think nothing of it.
Oh.
I listened back to the evidence, and you hear, Daddy.
Oh.
And that's when I kind of knew.
Somebody took you up on the invite?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say.
Well, that's actually going to be, not to give away our surprises, but Minnehaha Park is actually going to be one of our upcoming live feeds on our group page.
Let me tell you something. It sounds like there's something definitely there. Yeah.
Oh, most definitely. There's been a lot of death in them hills. Homeless people like to camp up there, and there have been a couple of bodies found up there.
Yeah. It sounds like it's been there. That park has been there for a while. That's what it sounds like.
Well, and back in the early days, late 1800s, early 1900s, we have a place up here called Hilliard, which to this day is still the bad part of the neighborhood.
Okay.
And then across the tracks where Minnehaha is considered Dogtown.
Oh.
Now, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Hilliard was known as the baddest spot in Spokane. This is where all the gunslingers would go, the troublemakers, the alcohol pushers.
Okay.
And there was at least a death a day in Hilliard. And in Dogtown. In Dogtown is where they would set up all the tents for the railroad workers.
Oh my God, yeah, God, a lot of stuff probably happened there, for sure.
So that was considered, what people like to call today Ghettosville.
Yeah. And let me tell you something, a lot of dark deeds happen and things get, for lack of a better word, get buried at midnight, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's a place we just recently investigated. It's called the Checkerboard Bar and Grill, owned by Ian May.
Okay.
And he had contacted us, and the bar is on the east side of town.
Okay.
Which is also a very rough neighborhood. I actually grew up on the east side.
Okay.
And I mean, you couldn't walk around the east side at night without, gang members or something messing with you.
Okay, so you had to be careful where you were going.
Exactly. And to this day, it's still kind of like that. They've cleaned it up a bit, but it's still considered bad part of town.
Wow.
And that place was just off the hook. And investigation number 1, we went outside the bar to the back.
Mm-hmm.
There used to sit a house about 50 feet from the bar.
Okay.
And there was like 2 or 3 murders in that house. So as the rest of the team is out there, you have Charles and Charles Johnson. He was one of my new additions. He's from Eastern State Paranormal Team.
Okay.
phenomenal investigator. And they're outside doing a spirit box session,
Okay.
and I'm just right by the women's bathroom. And all of a sudden, I hear this, like somebody pulls a stool out,
Okay.
and then I hear tink, 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 tink. I'm like, okay, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
So I go get my team members, and we're walking around, and I
Mm-hmm.
notice the flashlight I have on the bar facing, out towards me is gone. So we actually go and look in the back of the bar, and
Okay.
sure enough, our flashlight was pretty much thrown behind the bar.
Whoa.
And we asked if it would like us to play some Johnny Cash, because one of the reports was when they did a seance in there, the
Uh-huh.
jukebox started up on its own and started playing Johnny Cash.
Oh,
So when I
interesting.
asked that question, it
Yeah,
actually said later.
it did.
I was
Okay.
like, okay, all right, well, I'll play some Johnny Cash for you later, not a problem. And during the second investigation, we actually were all outside,
Uh-huh.
and we go over the evidence the next day, and we hear boot steps, like old school cowboy boots.
Oh my
Heel
God.
to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe.
Mm-hmm.
Then you hear a chair being drug out, and you
Oh.
hear bottles clinking together.
Oh my God.
The way the bar was ran back in the 30s was the guy who owned the bar at the time, his name was Joe.
Okay.
He would let people go back, pour their own drink, and then just leave them money on the table.
Cool.
So
Very
I
nice of him.
I kind of put two and two together and thought, well, maybe it was just an old patron that
Sure.
happened to die there from cause there was reports of people dying there from heart attacks or whatever, and just
Or, may-
falling off the stool in there and passing away.
or maybe this was his favorite spot. This is where he had all his good times. So he's like, I'm going back over there.
Exactly, and
God.
uh, it's just very interesting. Like the Hilliard Library bar.
Okay.
The lady heard a female scream in there, so we actually went in to communicate with the spirit. And
Okay.
you've seen the flashlight trick, right?
Yes. Yes.
We communicated with this spirit, and it's on one of our live feeds in our group page.
Okay.
For 45 minutes, we
Yes.
communicated with this spirit, turning the flashlight on and off.
Yes. You can
We
get a
found
lot of
out that it was
interesting evidence that way.
exactly, and Charles was actually the one that brought that in.
Okay. So because you know what, earlier I was thinking of another place, but that's in Tacoma. I got my towns in Washington. There's a place over there I've heard that's called Oakland Tavern that's supposed to be like, that's haunted. But then I realized that, a lot of these, and the reason why I bring that up is that a lot of these like places that were like taverns and bars and things like that, a lot of, besides that you had a lot of interesting characters, to put it nicely. You also had a lot of things that went out in the back alleys of these bars and these taverns, that were like kind of very, people ended up getting killed, and, you know, just their bodies discarded. A lot of things happened that were never investigated by the law, in other words. And I find
Exactly.
you find that a lot in a lot of these places, especially like what you've mentioned, like some of the parts of towns, it was like every man for himself kind of thing. And
Hmm.
and if you've got any type of transient population, nobody's there to ask, hey, what happened to so and so? I've never seen him again. Yeah, it's because the last time I saw him, he was at such and such a bar. Nobody ever sees the guy again. So,
exactly.
yeah, that's one of those common
And then,
denominators. Yeah.
and then there was also another spot that Ian introduced us to. Spokane has the underground tunnels.
You do? What
A
is
lot
that?
of them have been sealed off
Okay.
due to the city just kind of wanting to block them off
Okay.
for safety reasons. It originally started out as when Spokane, at one point in time, they were burning coal and garbage and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, to keep warm.
Okay.
So Spokane decided to put 15 miles of tunnel in and built a place called the steam plant. And they pushed steam to local businesses,
Okay.
and there were extra tunnels made, from like the Davenport to the spaghetti factory
Hmm.
for bootlegging.
I bet. Wow.
And we actually were able to go down into the underground tunnels and come out in this spot that went about a half a block long under basements.
Oh, it's that deep.
And a lot of footsteps and a lot of K2 spikes, but as far as any voices or anything goes, we didn't capture any, but it felt wonderful to be, where the Spokane history was.
Sure.
It just really kind of made me feel like I was back in the Prohibition days again.
Well, I bet. Because I was gonna say, yeah, that's another place wherever you got stuff like that going on, which is, um, anything along the, because also since Washington State, it butts up against Canada. During the Prohibition, there was a lot of, stuff coming in from, outside of the United States, like, the adjoining states. So I'm not surprised about what you're describing at all.
And Prohibition here in Spokane started 10 years earlier than anywhere else.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And that was due to the mayor of Spokane at the time. It was the first female mayor.
Wow, they were ahead of their
And
time.
that was on their top three things to do, was to shut drinking completely down.
I take it she was what they call teetotaler then, one of those okay. So she didn't believe in oh, so she was, I guess people were making a lot of money on booze way before prohibition hit the United States, then is what you're saying. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's usually what happens when things are forbidden. Like that anyway.
Right.
So
Pantera, stop, honey.
wow. Let me ask you something. And I'm going to ask you because I know that even though, you've always talked about, your, paranormal investigations as far as ghosts are concerned. I want to ask you about two things which Washington is known for. Washington State. Sightings of Bigfoot and UFO sightings. Have you had either or know of either?
Um, UFOs, I've heard a couple of things about. Actually, Charles's team, they like to go UFO hunting by the Air Force Base out here, Fairchild.
Okay. All right.
And he said they've seen a couple of weird things.
Okay. And the reason why
As
I'm asking
far
is
as
that some
big,
places are just renowned and your part of the country is known for
oh
them.
yeah, Northwest is known for Bigfoots.
Yes.
Um, I personally have never had an experience with a Bigfoot as much as I would love to,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole idea of Bigfoot just, I don't know, it's exciting to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I'm sure there's people that have lied about it. I mean, come on. But I think that there's
Oh,
another set of people that they really, I mean, I had a husband of a good friend of mine. And but he when he had decided he was up in Northern California, and he told me about a story that happened to him when he was a kid, and he actually saw one. I mean, he had no reason to lie to me. It was just it wasn't like I wasn't interviewing him. This was many years ago when he told me about it, and he says, "Look, I've never forgotten it." Uh, and that's what I'm saying. When you get it from sources that their credibility is fine, and they really have no reason to tell you or to disclose it, then there's a whole set of people that they're not lying about it. In other words, okay. And even if you take out a portion of it that maybe saw something else and they mistake it for Bigfoot, let's say, let's go with a bear or whatever, that still leaves another set of people that is like, what did they see? Okay, now,
Exactly.
and like I'm hoping that one day, we're gonna get actual proof that there is something like that. But again, despite the fact that we haven't ever had concrete proof to satisfy the scientific community, I still totally do not leave that out of the realm of the very possible. Like any day now, we're gonna get that that news flash that somebody's actually caught one, or some positive, absolute, indisputable proof. I just have that
And
feeling.
that's something that I really hope for. I mean, we've done a couple of investigations, um, like the Sacred Indian Ground
Hmm.
that we did. Now we captured a couple of drum beats, which I thought was
Ooh,
really cool.
wow.
But at the same time, you're out in the woods and it's nighttime. I
Yes.
every time I've got my fingers crossed. It's always in the back of my mind. What if a Bigfoot just comes walking out to us?
Exactly. It's like, and there's a bunch of people that happens to them also. And when it happens, they don't have a camera, even though everybody's got a phone, but they're just frozen. So there's a whole set of people. Number one, that never say anything. They just shut up after they see something. That's number one. Number two, that there's people that things happen to them when they're unprepared because they weren't really looking for a sighting, and they're just like, it happens, and like, hey, the only thing I got to go on is that I say I saw it or my experience. You know, Um as a matter of fact, I interviewed this gentleman who runs the Bigfoot Society out of Alabama, and he's been doing it since the '70s. And he was telling me that every once in a while when the cops get called when people see something, because I guess they have nobody else to call, they're so weirded out that they end up taking these people over to his house so that they could tell their story to him. And he says he's had some people that especially if it happens at night, that have told them, "Sir, do you mind if we stay here at your house till daylight? We don't want to go home at night." And he says these are adults, and he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I go, that to me tells me that regardless of what they actually saw, they think that they saw something that they're scared enough about that they don't even want to attempt to go back home or get back on the road at night.
I I
For
can't blame him. I run into something that's 8 foot tall and looks like he could eat me for breakfast. Yeah, I'm good. I'm
it's like,
staying the night
yeah,
somewhere.
it's like all of a sudden, yeah, even adults fear, what can get me in the dark can't get me at daytime, but whatever. I think that's normal. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Despite all the one people that purposely lie, there's a whole set of people that actually have seen something, and that to me that's more than enough evidence to think that there's something definitely out there. Whether you're talking, I've had other people that say, well, they're from another dimension. There's rips and from another dimension. Um, there's others. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, David Paulides, who's written about these disappearances in the state parks. And, you know, when you listen to some of his stories, it kind of, even though he doesn't say it out and out, it kind of infers that maybe some of these might be people or children, especially that are snatched away. Maybe because with Bigfoot, I was like, well, that puts a whole different spin on he's a friendly guy that doesn't want to have anything to do with humans. But yeah, yeah, there's something. To me personally, I see that as part of the paranormal. Paranormal to me is just not strictly the ghost thing. I think that things like this become part of the paranormal, or things
Yeah,
along those lines.
I gotta agree with you on that one. I believe Bigfoot is a paranormal thing. If it's something that people don't see every day, it's the same with aliens.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know,
that's another
I'm
one.
a very firm believer in aliens and Bigfoot. After after stepping into the paranormal realm,
Mm-hmm.
and actually capturing evidence that there is paranormal activity, it just kind of opens up your mindset to what else could be out there.
Well, you know what I think also that happens is that you realize, like you said, when you do this type of work, let's say, and we're talking something like paranormal ghosts, you realize, yeah, sometimes I capture evidence, sometimes I don't, but I've had enough experience firsthand to know that just because I can't reproduce it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Okay, so you realize, okay, so
Exactly.
just because nobody's captured a Bigfoot or an alien, or I mean, even though there's a million, versions of somebody that has some type of proof, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just, for me personally, just leaves that question mark. Like I'm not about to close the door on it. Absolutely not.
Exactly. And the non-believers, think, for example, crop circles. Oh, it's
Hmm.
people out there with planks of wood hopping and jumping.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry. Who's going to take 24 hours to create
Yes.
an 8 acre wide crop circle?
Exactly. And I mean, some of these things like that, when you look at them from I personally am thinking, I don't know how, if you're at ground level, and I maybe it's because I just don't know how to do it, but my ground level, how would I know how to basically flatten whatever it is, whatever the type of field you're walking in to get this type of layout or whatever it is that how the crop circles are in different shapes or whatever. I wouldn't know how to go about doing that so that it would look so perfect when you look at it from above. I don't
Hey,
know.
you'd have to be one hell of an artist.
Yeah, it's
And
like,
I mean, especially the ones that go from really small to gigantic.
uh-huh. Yes.
How are you going to get a piece of board in there that small
Exactly.
to do all that?
Exactly.
And if somebody, is jumping on them or knocking them down, you're going to be able to see the evidence right there. It's not all going to lay down from the ground up.
Right. It's
People on boards or people using their feet,
yes.
the it's going to snap at some point.
Right. And I've seen all these different versions of people like, that trying to, you know, debunk it, like saying, "Oh no, they did it this way." Again, I'm not going to say that there's people out there that probably have tried to do things that's like, yeah, but that still leaves other evidence that it's like, okay, that explanation does not, you can't apply that explanation to this. So that leaves again the question mark, like who did it? And you might think, okay, well, why would they? Is it because they're trying to kind of like give us a heads up that one day we're going to have what they call encounters of the fourth type, the fourth, where it's face to face? I don't know. So that people don't go run screaming, like, oh my God, the aliens. Which is another question is like, are they going to be friendly, or are we going to meet a civilization that's superior to us? Are we going to run the risk that we're going to be on the losing end of that meeting? You know?
Exactly. And I've talked to a couple of people who are, I guess you would call them theorists.
Mm-hmm.
They say that, us landing on the moon, we
Right.
were told by the alien race, you come up here again and we're going to wipe your planet out. And now China is trying to get up there. And all of a sudden, we got the quote unquote World War III coming.
Exactly. I
Could
didn't
it
know
be
that.
that, the aliens knew that China is trying to get up there and they're going to come down and meet us?
Exactly.
I mean,
And you know what?
it's
That's a
just,
good
the
question.
thought of it.
It was like we went to the moon and all this, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And we started doing stuff only at a certain level, of the atmosphere, whether it's building that space station or all the other things that we've been doing just to see how humans, if when they're out there for X amount of time, and you would think, well, why haven't they conducted experiments like, let's say, on the surface of the moon, which has got less gravity than Earth, but it's not the same as the middle of space? Like, well, why don't we do an experiment with how do humans do living in a space which has got some gravity, but not as much as obviously the Earth? And that's interesting. Hmm. Good question.
Exactly. And people say, oh, we're all alone in the universe, but the
Oh,
universe, I mean, there's so much more of the universe we don't even know about.
of
So how
course.
how can scientists say that we're the only living species when we can't even, get past Mars?
No, no.
Me,
Obviously.
I'm a firm believer in aliens.
Well, yeah,
You
and
know, I've never seen an alien. I've never seen a spaceship or anything, but for people to say that we're alone in the universe and there's nothing else out there, it's just kind of makes me scratch my head and say, well, how do you know that? Have you been out there personally?
again, there's a lot of people. You get the people. Besides the sightings in the sky, then you've got the other set of people who've had abduction scenarios, hidden memories. I mean, there's a whole array of people that have had different experiences. And again, I know that some of them either they're lying, some of them are suffering from mental illness, whatever. But then there's still leaves a whole bunch of people that have had some type of experience. And like you said, you cannot really believe that as vast as the universe is, that we keep on realizing it's ever expanding, it doesn't stop, there's no finite to the universe, that we're going to be the only intelligent things, whatever, in the entire universe. Is like, really? you know,
Exactly. It's like saying there's only one type of species of dog.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes life very interesting. Sometimes scary, but very interesting. And, let's see what happens. At what point we actually get somebody on Mars, even though they still debate about what's really there and a whole bunch of other stuff. It should be very interesting. But
Exactly.
there's a lot of stuff still to find out. So anyway, I would love to thank you for all the time you spent with me this afternoon. I'm putting a link to your website on the credits for anybody that wants to contact you. I don't know how far out you go for investigations, but if they're in the town of Spokane, I imagine that you guys, they can contact you and you take it from there, right?
Oh, most definite. And for the people that are outside of Spokane, um, it's not that we're going to charge them, but help with gas monies, always a
Sure.
plus. And we'll we'll help anybody we can.
That's great. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And you know what? That believe me, like you said, there's groups out there that charge, and if you, I can't see why somebody at least, if you're going to go out of your general area, they can't help you guys out with gasoline money, or because sometimes even going out of town, it's not only the gasoline. We're talking also the if you have to, stay somewhere, overnight or anything like that.
Let us
So,
camp out in your backyard and don't worry about the food. We'll bring enough bologna and peanut butter and jelly
don't worry
sandwiches
about
for
it.
today.
Let me tell you something. When you're caught up in an investigation, it's like whatever we'll do. Everybody gets so excited. So let me ask you: do you know what your next investigation's going to be? Do you guys have anything set, especially now with Halloween coming up?
We do. We actually just did a bake sale
Oh,
to
okay.
better our equipment. I'm an inspiring chef,
Oh, okay.
and I love spending time in the kitchen, especially with my wife. It's just the best bonding time in the world for us.
Sure.
And we did a drawing
You did.
for three members of whoever did the raffle to come out on a live feed investigation with us.
Wow.
And we'll be taking them out to Fairmont Cemetery here in Spokane. A lot of history in that place.
Okay.
And
So,
as far as the Halloween show goes, Um, we're going to be filming on the 5th of October on our live feed from the Montana State Penitentiary.
Oh, you're going to Montana. Oh, how cool to that
And
penitentiary.
out of the lady's mouth who runs it,
That is such
there
an
has
interesting
not
place.
been a group that has lasted all night in this place.
Are you kidding? Really?
We will be locked in from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Oh my God.
So that is definitely something to tune into. And we also do live feeds on our page, which is we
Okay.
pretty much film from our phones.
Okay, right
And
on
it's,
Facebook on Facebook on a Facebook live feed is what you're saying, right?
yeah, in our group page.
Okay.
And it's like you guys are there with us.
Mm-hmm.
You see what we see, and we've had a lot of positive results from this, things that we don't hear that our fans have actually heard.
You know what? That's so interesting because the same thing has happened that yeah, sometimes you just because maybe you're caught up in the moment and you've got some people that are witnessing it that see or hear things. Yes. Yes.
Exactly. My niece, Hannah Dement, was the one to thank for that one. That was her brilliant idea.
Okay. She's got her thinking cap on there. So again, thank you so much. I have enjoyed this talk so much, and I wanted to thank you for all
Oh,
the
very
time.
much
Like I
so.
said, I'm going to put a link for your site on the credits. Anybody can get a hold of you guys. And absolutely, sounds like you got a lot of exciting things going on with your group. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate this time very much. It's been a majorly definite pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, take care and have a great Sunday. Okay.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
So I love speaking to other people, and I said this before. I'm going to say it again from other parts of the country because again, like I mentioned some of the famous well-known haunts um, up in that part of the country in Spokane, and these are the ones that sometimes you see on shows or other groups have gone to. But then you have the instances like what happened with him, when he went to that hospital. uh, uh, you know your own backyard. This is the town you live in. Like he's talking about, this place had a tent city, uh, all these things that happened. And this is the kind of stuff, like I said, you're never sometimes you read in a book, sometimes you don't, but a lot of times you never ever see this stuff when you look at the shows, at the regular paranormal shows that are out there. And and also that experience that he described, where after they went to this hospital, and he admitted that he'd made a mistake, being confrontational with whatever was there, even though it sounds very much like he does take precautions on protecting himself. This was something he said basically his team fell apart, and it kind of like steered him away from paranormal work for a year. Plus, it sounds like it affected him profoundly on a personal level. And a lot of people, and I've spoken about this before, uh, there's a lot of different layers of entities that you can run across when you're doing paranormal work. The good portion of them, I would say 80% of them, if there is something there, are your normal, regular human dead. Okay, whether they were a nice person, whether they were lost, whether they were just SOBs, but at the end of the day, they're still human entities. I would say about a good 80% of what you're going to run across are going to be things along those lines. And then that leaves the other 20%. The other 20% is something like what he saw, which is a towering shadow per thing with red eyes. Okay? Things along this nature. This other 20% is what I referred to as non-human entities. Okay? And by this I mean they've never been human. This could range from the demonic, again minor, elementals, and there's varying degrees of non-human entities out there. Okay? Uh, and they range from either indifferent to humans, unless you screw with them and tap them once too many times on the shoulders. And I've spoken about this other times on my show. This has mostly, these are the elemental types. Okay, you leave them alone and they leave you alone. Okay, and then from there you start getting into darker stuff. Elementals that are a bit darker, shadow people, other type of entities, exactly like what he was describing. They feed off of fear. They feed off of people being sad and unhappy. And by this, again, because I have a lot of people asking me about this, I go, being human means that you're going to feel fear and being sad, whatever. I mean, depending on what's happening in your life, and you feel it. I'm talking about when, like what he talked about, when you go into depression, which you're passing day after day after day, and you're in this funk, and all the other things that normally interest you, they kind of fall by the wayside. It interferes and affects your relationships with your family, which are the closest to them, and you start going into this alienation bubble. Okay, this is where it wants to like kind of herd you into, so you start experiencing this because this is what it feeds off of. Okay, and in some cases, I'm not going to say any, but sometimes that's when you have people that end up taking their own lives, especially if they've never had a history of suicide or mental illness. Okay, or in other cases, if you have possession, when people do horrific things to other people, or their own family members. But yes, this is what it feeds off of. But this this is it's a process. Okay, it's a process. Luckily, it sounds like he snapped himself out of it. Okay, and he's got plans. He's got things to look forward to, which is what, believe it or not, is part of the, if you really want to get rid of stuff like that, is when you start feeling hopeful again and you start looking forward to things, whatever they might be, whatever makes you happy. It's when none of the things that make you happy make you happy. That's when you're in trouble. But anyway, yes, there are things like this that can happen to paranormal investigators depending on what they encounter, especially if they're not prepared for it or they underestimate what they've run across, which it sounds a little bit like what he did when he was kind of provoked it. And even though he kind of used, which I had to laugh, he used another team member as the bait. Whatever this was, recognized that the one that was really doing the confrontation was him, because it left that other member out of its sights and it took aim at him. All right. And sometimes things like this, unless you really have a good understanding of what you're up against, sometimes you have to wait and just find out more about what it is that you're dealing with, because 9 times out of 10 you're underestimating it. Okay, or its ability to jump out of where it's at and attach itself to you despite your whatever you did at the beginning to protect yourself. Now, a warning to all present or wannabe ghost hunters. Yeah, that's the kind of thing you can run across. And let me say something, because I'm gonna say I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm a girl, I'm a woman, female, and you've got men. And I'm going to say this for the men. Don't take offense, because women usually don't do this. Men, I know, sometimes are more confrontational in these circumstances because they want to deal with it like against a human man. Like I'm big or I'm a man, and that's not the same thing that works in the spiritual world. Okay? Like again, especially like I said, especially when you don't know what you're up against. That confrontation, testosterone, who's king of the hill. Sometimes it's just not the wisest thing to do. until you know exactly what you're dealing with, because you'd be surprised at who ends up having the last laugh. And I hate to say it, some guys, you got to be careful with what you're doing out there when you're going out there. Either you put yourself in that position, or you have an entity that is smart enough, okay, especially if it's dark, to realize that's exactly what they need to do to get you to provoke it, because they want to go up against you. And basically, by the time you're going out, they're coming back. They're old. They've been around for a long time. So anyway, guys, I hope you like the show. All right. I hope you subscribe to my channel. Catch me on Facebook and on Twitter via Periscope for live streams. Occasionally, I am live streaming on YouTube. My book's going to be released September 30th. I'm working on a second one. I'm going to be at Scarefest at the end of September, first weekend of October over in Kentucky. I'm also the weekend after that doing Animate Florida down here in Miami. And in a couple of weeks, I'm also doing a paranormal tour here out of Miami at the DuPont building, which is a very old building that was built in downtown Miami since the 1930s. But prior to that, there was a very beautiful hotel called the Hallison Hotel that was built there like around the turn of the century, and it was demolished in the 1930s, where the DuPont building was built there. We're conducting a paranormal tour there for it's going to be in a couple of weeks down in the downtown Miami area. So guys, I hope you like it, and thank you so much for viewing the show. Take care.